Right, so the question of who exactly is running the country is not a question that should require debate, frankly. Keir Starmer was the leader of the largest party in the UK last year. Labour won the election, therefore. So he became Prime Minister. But it's been a question for quite some time, given he appears to require having his hand held at all times when making political decisions. And of course he swings rapidly from one position to another, doesn't he? Implying little to no input on his part. Therefore, who is making the decisions that affect all of us, if not the mandated elected leader of the Labour Party? Well, there's been a lot of debate about this, as I said, but it seems we finally have a definitive answer at last, because as a result of an expose by Ailbhe Rea and Bloomberg, it very much appears that the person dictating the direction this country is taking and the decisions being made in this government very much is the unelected, not widely known at all, but seriously needs to be, Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's version of what Dominic Cummings was to Boris Johnson. And it is the very worst of Labour policy that appears to be McSweeney's doing. But why has this come out now? Has McSweeney outlasted his usefulness and this is hanging him out to dry? Or is at least one mainstream media outlet actually showing that they can investigate, at least one of their journalists can, to expose the truth? Right, so Starmer's Labour Party finds itself gripped in a mess, a scandal all of Starmer's doing, because, frankly, if he was a more capable leader, capable at all in fact, capable of making decisions, capable of actual leadership, this isn't a mess he'd even be in, or the Labour Party either. But instead his apparent ineptitude now sees Labour being battered by a storm of internal disarray and, well, confusion for all the rest of us, really, so let's try and make some sense of it. Recent revelations, particularly in this damning report that I've mentioned already from Bloomberg, have exposed a power dynamic within Labour that raises serious questions about who exactly is truly steering the party, and by extension, the whole of this country. According to the report, Keir Starmer, the elected leader, now Prime Minister, wishes to actually scrap the cruel and widely condemned two-child benefit cap to demonstrate Labour's seriousness in tackling child poverty. It is, as we should all know, a deeply unpopular policy. It's cost Labour members and votes. It's now 8 years old, and it isn't Labour at all, and it's just keeping kids in poverty. And as a result, many Labour members, if they still are members, absolutely hate it. It's everything that Labour is meant to oppose. Yet Starmer's chief of staff, his election campaign manager from running to be Labour leader to every election since, Morgan McSweeney, a completely unelected and largely invisible figure to the public, not like Cummings at all in that regard, who seemed to enjoy the attention. This guy shuns it, though. He lurks in the shadows, so to speak. Is allegedly the force stopping this change. So the implications are absolutely horrific. The unelected McSweeney, it seems, is dictating government policy, therefore, overruling elected ministers perhaps, even the Prime Minister at that, and silencing internal dissent along the way. Therefore, there seems to be a case to contend that Keir Starmer is not in charge of either his party or his government. It's Morgan McSweeney instead, operating behind closed doors, never having taken part in an election, who appears to be calling the shots. And if this is true, and it's been widely speculated for a long time now that this is the case, then it undermines not only Labour's credibility as a democratic force, but also the broader promise of British parliamentary democracy. At a time when the country desperately needs leadership that is rooted in compassion and principle and public accountability, the sort of stuff we used to expect from Labour once upon a time, the founding principles it was built on. What it appears to be getting instead is a politics dominated by strategic spin and autocratic control that would make the Tories blush. And he's right up there with Nigel Farage basically calling all the shots where Reform UK is concerned. The two-child benefit cap was introduced by the Tories in 2017 and has been one of the most egregious welfare policies of the austerity era. It is plain evil. It limits child benefit payments to the first 2 children in a family, punishing the most vulnerable families for having more than 2 children. The argument put out to support this was to stop feckless parents having large families. The media is great at painting a picture of absolute nonsense in this respect, because the truth is it just punishes kids for being born who had no say in the matter. Multiple studies, including from the Child Poverty Action Group, have demonstrated the cap's devastating impact on child poverty. It has become a potent symbol of economic cruelty, widely condemned across the political spectrum, including apparently by Keir Starmer himself behind closed doors. Yet Labour's position on this issue under Starmer has been nothing short of schizophrenic. Last year, as you might well remember, 7 Labour MPs were suspended for voting against the cap after being whipped to support it. Now it emerges, according to Bloomberg's reports, that Starmer actually agrees with them, but apparently is being either overruled by McSweeney or doesn't dare challenge him. I'm minded to remember that both Zara Sultan and John McDonnell remain suspended from this event. So if true, this suspension that they continue to endure is actually one Starmer supports. This raises a bit of a disturbing question then, doesn't it? If Starmer genuinely believes in lifting the cap, why did he allow his party to discipline MPs who stood for the very policy he actually supported? The answer, it seems, lies in his complete dependence on McSweeney's guidance. That, and it was an opportunity to clobber the left of the party, of course, who he absolutely hates. But either way, this is not leadership, it's cowardice. It's masquerading as pragmatism that is punishing hundreds of thousands of kids, keeping them growing up in poverty. So who is Morgan McSweeney, and why does he wield such immense power over government policy? It's a question I'll reiterate periodically. I've answered it before in other videos, because this guy hides behind the scenes, and more people need to know about him. McSweeney is Starmer's chief of staff, a director of strategy, a behind-the-scenes operator with no electoral mandate and virtually no public profile either. Yet by all accounts he functions as Labour's unelected kingmaker, the architect of its electoral messaging, and more importantly to all of us, apparently the gatekeeper of its policy platform too. Labour insiders have long known McSweeney's influence runs deep, but the Bloomberg report marks the first time the public has been confronted so directly with the implications of that influence. What does it say about the state of our democracy when a man who has never stood for public office can seemingly single-handedly overrule the Prime Minister and the Cabinet on a policy that could lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty? It goes further than just Starmer. Even Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves and DWP boss Liz Kendall have apparently both also previously expressed support for ending the cap, having reportedly backed down after McSweeney said no. Claims that McSweeney has the power to block worked-up plans by elected ministers have been vociferously denied by Labour sources, but the cap remains in place, doesn't it? So surely that conclusion writes itself. There's another take we can address here, though. In regards to the two-child benefit cap, no Labour ministers have been hammered over the failure to lift it, quite like Starmer, Reeves and Kendall have. So is this Bloomberg article all about trying to rehabilitate their images, and is it perhaps the first sign that McSweeney's being hung out to dry by them? I think putting him in the frame as the boss in government is a bad way to go about that, if that is the case. It still implies a dearth of real leadership and begs the question, what will they do without him? It's easy to believe that this could be a move against McSweeney because Reeves and Kendall have been particularly nasty about benefits and claimants previously. Reeves is married to one of the top civil servants from within the Tory-run DWP. She's long crowed about being tougher on benefits than the Tories in opposition. So there's a whiff of rehabilitation attempts with this story, I think. If they are trying to do to McSweeney what was done to Cummings, though, expect the mainstream media to be talking an awful lot more about McSweeney going forwards, though. The real issue here, though, is Starmer's blatant political weakness. A strong leader would take a stand, wouldn't they? Not let themselves be overruled by one of the staff. Perhaps he's doing that now, but it's a bit late when you're already seen as weak and needing to take instruction from another. If he did ditch McSweeney, who would replace him? We'd assume there would be someone. A serious Prime Minister would face down internal advisers who stand in the way of progress. Yet time and again, Starmer has demonstrated a troubling reliance on McSweeney. Whether it's policy development or media strategy or internal party management, McSweeney's word appears to always be the final one. This isn't the first time Starmer's lack of independence has been questioned either. He has flip-flopped on key pledges, from nationalising utilities to abolishing tuition fees. Every shift is couched in the language of pragmatism, but it is increasingly resembling a chronic fear of upsetting McSweeney's carefully curated electoral strategy. The whole 5D chess game. But it's not Starmer playing it, is it? Rather than leading the party, Starmer is simply following his aide's script, a script that prioritises political caution over moral clarity, polling over principle, optics over the change that Starmer promised. This is, therefore, a completely dysfunctional government. The lack of an actual elected leadership dynamic is not just a diplomatic issue, it is causing real damage to Labour's prospects. The decision to keep the two-child benefit cap, along with other unpopular measures like the winter fuel allowance cuts, has alienated core supporters and driven a dramatic decline in party membership. According to Labour list, the party has lost 11% of its members since the general election. That was up until March of this year. That would amount to one member every 10 minutes cutting up their membership card under Starmer's leadership. The situation has become so dire that the party has decided now to stop publishing membership figures altogether now, apparently. A move condemned by members of Labour's own National Executive Committee. But the reason for that is obvious. The party is hemorrhaging support, and the leadership is terrified of the optics. They have always been published before, so there's no justifying this at all. Financially, Labour is also in a precarious position now. It is operating under a financial recovery plan at the moment, you might be interested to know, and is expected to be £4 million short of what it needs to fight elections next year. It is an irony too bitter to ignore that a few years ago Rachel Reeves was celebrating falling membership as a sign that Labour was purging itself of the wrong sort of people that weren't really Labour. Now it's those lost members who are leaving a gaping hole in the party's budget and reputation, and it hardly instills confidence in their running of the economy when they can't even fund the running of their own party apparently now. The two-child benefit cap debate has become symbolic of the broader disillusionment with Starmer's leadership, or I should say McSweeney's leadership perhaps. Even mainstream media outlets who have generally been sympathetic to Labour are warning that unless the party changes direction, it will continue to lose support. And maybe this is why McSweeney's time is perhaps coming. Furthermore, the argument that Labour voters support the cap, as McSweeney is claiming is his justification for keeping the cap, does not hold up to scrutiny. Multiple polls show that Labour supporters overwhelmingly back action to tackle poverty and inequality, and lifting the cap is amongst the most cost-effective ways that can be done. £2.5 billion it would cost to lift that cap, and to do so would lift 540,000 people under 20 out of absolute poverty. That's kids, basically, being raised in households where their income is 60% or below average income. So McSweeney's claim is not only incorrect, but disingenuous, and yet it appears that this is driving Labour policy. What is perhaps most tragic about this entire episode is that it undermines the very strategy it's supposed to be serving. The logic behind keeping the cap is that Labour must appear fiscally responsible and electorally cautious. But the result has been anything but successful. Instead of gaining ground with swing voters, Labour is losing its base, bleeding away to the Lib Dems and Greens. Instead of appearing economically competent, it is now embroiled in a financial crisis of its own making, both nationally and, as it happens, within its own party at the same time. Labour doesn't just need good policies, it needs good news stories. Lifting the cap could be one. It would signal compassion, competence, and a willingness to lead with principle. That would have to come with Starmer's departure as well, in my mind, because he's too widely seen as compromised now, too widely seen to change his mind too easily, too widely seen as an abject liar that nobody can possibly trust. The party, even if it does right by kids finally after this, is mired in the optics of too much contradiction, because it is led by a man who says one thing and does another, whilst also being beholden to a strategist who is unelected, unaccountable, and apparently unchallengeable as well. This is not how democracy is supposed to work. In a functioning parliamentary democracy, it is the elected representatives who make decisions, accountable to their constituents and the broader public. When unelected aides wield this level of influence, it distorts the democratic process and erodes trust in politics. Morgan McSweeney may be brilliant at strategy. I know, I can hear you laughing. Permit me to play devil's advocate for a moment, though. But he was not elected to lead this country. Keir Starmer was. If Starmer cannot assert that leadership, then he must ask himself why he is in the role at all. What are you doing there? We're certainly asking that question, are we not? Labour has got a choice to make, as I see it. It can continue down this path of strategic short-sightedness, controlled by backroom advisors and paralysed by fear of making mistakes, which they've ended up making anyway, or it can reassert democratic leadership, guided by actual values, accountable to its actual members, and committed to real change. The two-child benefit cap must go to do that, but frankly so must Starmer and McSweeney. The policy must go because it is cruel and counterproductive. Keeping it is just symbolic of everything that is wrong with the current Labour leadership, which is why, in my view, they've got to go as well. If Keir Starmer wanted to prove he's not merely a puppet, he needed to do it a long time ago. It's far too late now. And this story, be it an expose of McSweeney's control or an orchestrated political move against him now being facilitated by this Bloomberg article, it won't make any difference as long as Starmer is still leading. Even if McSweeney goes, the optics are still going to be on who replaces him and whether Starmer is now the leader or whoever the McSweeney replacement is instead. Meanwhile, this isn't Keir Starmer's only problem, of course. A distinctly Jeremy Corbyn-shaped one has appeared on the horizon, and he's bringing a bill that's going to damn Starmer whether he backs it or opposes it. The number of messes Starmer has made for himself truly is testament to his political ineptitude, but he really does need to go. But will Corbyn's latest move hurry that along? Find out all the details of that in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers folks.